Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful, creepy human being you, and welcome to today's true crime episode. I am so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the murder of 22-year-old Anthony Riggs. Army Specialist Anthony Riggs returned home from the Gulf War expecting safety and stability and a new start, but instead he was gunned down in Detroit just days after coming home. Now, initially, police believed this was a random act of violence, but as they dug deeper, they began to uncover a web of secrets, betrayals, and hidden motives that painted a far darker picture of what really happened that night. But before we get into the details of today's case, if you've not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week. Hello? Like this week? And I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. Now, before we get into the details of today's case, I first need to say a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Aura. Now, I want to start this off with a question for you, okay? And the question for you is this. Have you ever noticed how many emails you get from companies you've never heard of? Or calls or texts from numbers that just seem a little bit off? Well, the reason that you're getting this might be because of data brokers, okay? And data brokers make billions, yes, billions with a B of dollars by taking yours and my private and personal information and selling it to people that you really don't want to have it, like marketers and scammers. And here's the thing, legally, they are required to remove your information if you want them to, right? But they make the process of removal super confusing and difficult on purpose, and that's one of the ways in which Aura comes in. They remove your information from all of these types of sites, and look at just how many can have your information. Like, I don't know who Instant Data is, but they have my information without my permission, and Aura helps me remove it. They help me remove it, and they help me keep it off. They do all the work so I do not have to. And that's not even all they do. They're like all-in-one digital security. You can get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web. You can get time fraud alerts for credit and banking. You can get a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more. And if anything does happen, because occasionally things do, Aura has US fraud experts ready to help you 24/7. So you get all the online protection you could ever want or need in one place, and that's why I personally recommend Aura. Now listen, I don't want to leave my personal or private information exposed, and I don't think you do either. So if all of this sounds as good to you as it does to me, make sure to click the link in my description box. That's aura.com/Bratterstein. It lets them know I'm the one that sent you. And try Aura out for free for 14 days and see if your personal and private information has been leaked online. And if it has, let Aura help you put a stop to it today. Now, I just want to say a big thank you to Aura for partnering with me on today's video. It's partners like Aura that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. Now, with all of that said, today I'm going to tell you the entire story of the murder of Anthony Riggs. I read all the things so you do not have to. And at the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. Okay? I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your brain as we go through the details of this case. But of course, I want you to answer once you have something to go on, okay? And the question of the day is this. Do you believe that Anthony Riggs's murder was, how'd you word it? Expertly planned. That seems a little bit vague, but once we get to the end, you will know what I mean when I'm asking that question. But I want to give it to you now so you know yourself thinking about it. But please leave me a comment down below at the end with your answer, because I am curious to hear what you have to say. And now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of 22-year-old Anthony Riggs. Now, Anthony was born on December 12th, 1968, and he was one of 2 children. He was the baby with an older sister named Regina, and they were born to their mother, Leslie. Now, growing up, they were said to have lived in Los Angeles, and they lived there until Anthony was about a teenager. And by then, the area that they lived in had just sort of gone to shit a little bit. Like, if you've been to LA or if you're from LA, you would know that like there are areas that are super, super nice, but there are a lot of areas for most people who live there that kind of just aren't, especially in recent years. They're just like not that nice anymore. So though they had lived there a long time, Leslie, their mother, got to a place where she decided that she just wanted to have them in a better place, a place that was cleaner and safer. And she knew that she couldn't protect them forever, but she just kind of wanted a fresh start. So the family moved to Las Vegas, which I don't really associate Las Vegas with a cleaner, happier, better start. But that's because I associate Las Vegas with just like the Strip, and there's a lot behind Nevada, which I have seen before that was totally different. It's a different vibe. It's a different situation. But I read online, and this is kind of weird, I think maybe they lived in Vegas before living in Los Angeles, because if you look online, it does say that Anthony was born in Vegas, but then grew up in LA. So I don't know if like Vegas was their hometown, they moved to LA and they moved back, or what, but it's also not super relevant. I'm just giving you, backstory here because Anthony's life is just as important as Anthony's death. But what really matters here and what's most important is who Anthony was in his life and to those who loved him. And Anthony was just said to be the type of kid that even from the time he was born, from the time he was little, he was seen as special. He was not like normal kids. He was kind of wise. He had sort of like an old man's soul. And everybody who met him thought he was like a genius. He was super smart, super quick, super bright, but not like pretentious at all. He was the type of kid who, yeah, he knew he was smart, but he had a heart of gold. Do you know what I mean? And this was something that sort of bled into his teenage years and also into his adult years. He was just this person who had this inherent need to help those around him. He wanted everybody to be able to succeed. He wanted everybody to like live up to their full potential and be the best versions of themselves. And he wasn't afraid, even in his teenage years, to sort of like be seen as a square to do that. Like, for example, when he was in high school, some of his friends started to like, do more high school things. They started to branch out. They started to party. They started to drink. They started to do more drugs, right? And Anthony was not afraid to be like, listen, just say no. You know what I mean? He wasn't the type of person who was afraid to be like, this is bad for you. This is bad for us. Let's go do something else, as opposed to doing these things that are not good for you and not good for your life. And that is a difficult thing to do, though it may be the right thing to do. It's especially difficult when you're a teenager, when the majority of people are just trying to fit in. You don't want to be seen as the killjoy, the buzzkill. But Anthony didn't care. He's like, I'm looking at the long game, and the long game is this is bad for you, and I want you to be the best version of yourself, and this isn't how you get there. And this wasn't something that was reserved just for his friends too. Of course, the people he cared about and the people he loved the most are the people he poured the most into. But this is how he was with like everybody he met. He was the type of person who could see the good in everyone. He wasn't the type of person who believed people had ulterior motives or expected the worst out of them. He always gave people the benefit of the doubt, and he was just said to be like the nicest guy. Now, because Anthony was this nice guy who had this giving nature and this inherent need to give back to those around him, his career choice ended up making total sense for him. He ended up joining the military, and it just seemed like a logical step. So he joined like right out of high school. He wanted to do something good and something meaningful with his life, and he was definitely the type of guy to give his all, like 100% to anything that was important to him. And for him, this seemed like the best way for him to do that. So he joined the army. He did what he had to do in the army. He finished his basic training, and he ended up actually getting stationed in Germany, which was a totally wild thing for him, because for him growing up, like he hadn't been to that many places at all, and definitely hadn't been out of the country. So this was, I feel like, and if you are or were in the military or know anybody who was or is, because I do, my dad, but he died when I was little, so I've never got to ask him this as an adult, but like, is part of the appeal of joining the military, besides like the, all the altruistic stuff, is part of it for anyone the appeal of just being able to travel? Because it seems like it could be. Though I expect that when you are traveling, you are doing some things that are less sightseeing than I would do, right? So I'm just kind of curious, but that's neither here nor there. Just curious. Now back to the story. Germany. It was while in Germany that Anthony was going to meet a woman, a woman who was going to become very important in his life. And this was a little lady named Tony. Now, Tony was born in Detroit, and I have never been there. Is that where Barbarian was located? The movie? I think it was. Anyway, I have heard and I have seen that it is sort of like a rough place. There is statistically a lot of crime, more so at that time, because I believe that the crime there has been on a decline in recent years. But at the time, there was a lot of crime, both property and violent crime, a lot of drugs, a lot of robberies. And it was just kind of like the type of place where you had to be on your toes. So Tony grew up sort of like tough and tumble. Wait, is that a thing? Tough and tumble? Yeah, sure. A tough and tumble type of gal. Tony was also seen as a little bit of a success story because a lot of kids who lived in this area at this time did get themselves into their fair share of trouble. They went down bad paths, and Tony just did not do that. She was the type of girl who completely stayed out of trouble. She finished high school with plans to go to college. She wanted to make a better life for herself, and that was a super big deal. And she was also the type of kid who wanted to give back. She had that same sort of altruistic spirit that Anthony did, and so she, like him, wanted to give back to people who needed it. But for her, she wanted to become a nurse. Those who knew her thought that she had a natural, like, compassionate and giving nature, and so nursing made total sense for her. It was the type of job that she could do well because it combined all of her naturally given talents. Now, unfortunately for Tony, her plans to become a nurse and all of that did get derailed a little bit. And that's because prior to her beginning her chase towards that life, she met a man. And men really can be distracting sometimes, can't they? Especially the hotties. And this guy that Tony met, she definitely thought was a hottie. He was an army guy. Not Anthony, but a different army guy. And the two of them met. They thought they were like, oh, you're hot, I'm hot, let's hang out. And they did. They ended up hanging out, and Tony ended up getting pregnant. So I don't know if it's because they got pregnant or because they were just into each other, but they did get married. Okay, so Tony, she's married to this military dude. His name is Marcus, by the way. He's in the army. He ends up getting stationed somewhere. And where do you think he gets stationed? Germany. And who else is stationed in Germany? Anthony, okay? Coming full circle here. And Anthony ends up meeting Tony. And And Anthony meets Tony, yes. And Anthony thinks Tony's pretty cute. He's pretty interested in her. And lucky for him, Tony's relationship with Marcus, her daughter's father, did not last very long, quickly fizzled out. And that left Tony available for Anthony, who had been interested. Now, prior to getting in this relationship, they were just friends, right? Like, they had met because they were both in Germany, and he knew going in that she was in Germany because she was married to somebody who was stationed there. So they were friends. And then when her relationship fell apart, he was a shoulder for her to cry on. And remember, he was the type of guy who was very caring. He didn't like to see anybody hurt or heartbroken or sad. And on top of that, he did think that she was pretty, so he wanted to be there for her. So he was there for her as the relationship fell apart. And then, he was there for her when she was single, and he was too, and they were, and things happened. So within no time, the two were dating, and he was pretty crazy about her. And he wasn't just crazy about her, he was also crazy about her young daughter, okay? He loved kids. He loved the idea of getting to be a dad. And so he was super excited about the idea of perhaps moving into more of a father/stepfather sort of role if he was lucky enough to be able to take on that role. Like, if he was worthy of the relationship and worthy of, because you can date, because here's my position. Okay, here we go. I mean, for me, I'm not going to say about anybody else's life, but if me and my husband were to get divorced, or my husband was to no longer be here for whatever reason, right? No. But if that was to happen, one, I probably wouldn't date until my kid was like 18. But if I did, the person wouldn't be around Charlie. They just wouldn't, because I don't trust people around my kid. Like, the vetting process would be pretty effing intense. You know what I mean? And so what was my point? Oh, Anthony recognized that was an important thing. And even though their relationship was moving fast, he was like, I hope I am worthy of that role, because being able to be in somebody else's kid's life is valuable. And I think it's very important. More important than I think some people put value on it, because you see sometimes these people who rush into relationships, and this is actually an example of that. And that's on Tony, but rush into relationships with people and bring kids into it. And it's like, you got to know that you trust people before you let them around your kids. Because we see those cases. There's the one that I covered, oh my God, a few months ago with the stepbrother who like killed his stepsister. And then there's, gouged out. There are those cases, and it makes me very nervous. But what was my point? Oh, Anthony really loved Tony, really loved her daughter, and really loved the idea of one day becoming her stepfather. But first, they'd have to see if their relationship could stand not only the test of time, but the test of distance. Because now that Toni was no longer with her daughter's father, she leaves Germany. She leaves Germany and she goes back to Detroit to be with her family. So now her and Anthony, she's Toni, her and Anthony are maintaining a long distance relationship. And if you've ever done that, that's super hard. That's hard when it's just a couple hours. A whole country, I can't even imagine. Because me and my husband, when we first started dating for like the first year, we were long distance. And it is hard and it can really, really challenge you and like be like, is this what I want to be doing? But for them, just like for me, it was worth it because they loved each other and they wanted to make it work. So they wrote each other love letters to sort of keep the romance alive, and he just wanted to make sure that she knew how much he cared about her and how much he wanted to really take a stab at having a family with the three of them once he was back in the States. So he was in Germany doing his thing. She was in the States and she did start nursing school like she wanted to, and they were just sort of counting down the days until they could be together. And eventually they would. And man, it was just so cute. So Anthony finds out he's going to be stationed back in the U.S. Specifically, he's going to be stationed at Fort Bliss in Texas. And when he finds out, he doesn't tell Toni. Instead, he gets on a plane and he flies straight to Detroit so that he can surprise her. Can you imagine how cute that would be? And so he does that. They have this wonderful weekend together. They're so excited. And then he does have to leave. Okay, he has to leave and he has to go to Texas. She's in Detroit, so that he can, go and do what everyone does when they are stationed in a place. But now they were long distance still, but they were a lot closer than they had been before. Now, because they wanted to be closer and now they were at least in the same country, Toni decided to take steps to be closer to Anthony, and she applied for an internship, which would have put her at a hospital in, or like an internship facility. I don't know exactly how that works, but it would have been in Las Vegas. And she chose Las Vegas because that's closer to Texas, one. And two, it's where Anthony's mom lived. And even though Anthony's mom only had a 1-bedroom apartment, she happily accepted both Toni and her daughter into her house so that her son could be closer to the woman that he loved. So Toni and her daughter settled into their new life in Las Vegas, and now they were close enough that Anthony was able to come and visit them from time to time. And it was on one of these visits when he came to Las Vegas that he was going to ask Toni to make things more official. Okay, and it was already pretty official and pretty serious because she's literally living with his mother, but he wanted to bring the law into it. He was excited, he loved her, and he wanted to marry her. No, they hadn't been together very long. His family definitely thought that this was pretty sudden. And I mean, I don't want to generalize, but there is a stereotype that military dudes do be getting engaged and married pretty quick. But this is, for a variety of reasons, like the financial incentives and the desire to have that sort of emotional connection with a person, for a soldier to have that person that they can talk to and who can help them cope from the stress of frequent relocations and deployments, and to have somebody and something waiting for you when you get home, so I do understand it. And for Anthony, he was about to be deployed to Saudi Arabia. So he wanted to lock this shit down before he left. So he had this life to come back home to. So she said yes, and Anthony and Toni married in a small courthouse wedding, and this was on October 2nd, of 1989. Now, they were pretty young when they got married. They were both in their early 20s, but they were so excited to do it, okay? Anthony was beaming. He was a beaming groom on his wedding day, and he looked at Toni the way any woman wants to be looked at on her wedding day. He really did seem like he felt like the luckiest guy in the world. And they had such big plans. They had these plans to be together and to have a life and to grow old together. And they wanted to have a good partnership and a good family. And yes, they were young, but they were also just both super committed to one another, it seemed. And Anthony was so excited to be a father to Toni's daughter. And Toni loved her daughter and loved the idea of having a family unit. Anthony's family was super excited for him. They were happy that he had met a woman that made him so happy and that he was so excited about. And Toni was excited about Anthony and the potential that they had together. Toni loved her daughter. That was the love of her life. And so she knew that she wanted to be married. She wanted her daughter to have the opportunity to come from a solid household with a whole and loving family, and wanted more than anything to give her a happy and secure childhood. So after getting married, Anthony and Tony were finally able to have like a life together where they were living together. So the two girlies, Tony and her daughter, packed up all of their stuff from Vegas and they headed to Texas in Fort Bliss because now they could live together, and they moved in together so they could have a little bit of family time before Anthony was deployed to Saudi Arabia in the Gulf War, where he was a Patriot missile crew member, I believe. So Anthony, he was gone for just over a year, and then he came back home. And when he came back home, things were very different. We're going to get more into that in a little bit. But the long and short of it for our purposes now is that when he came home, Tony's daughter, and Tony's brother loaded up in Anthony's car, I believe it was, and headed to Detroit. Now remember, Tony was from Detroit. This is where her family was from. This is where she was from. This is where all of her community was. So she was super excited to be going back there where she could be living closer to family and have that safety net and that community. So they get in the car and they haul their asses across the country. It's like more than 1,000 miles, this drive, which sounds miserable. And when they finally arrive in Detroit, it is nighttime. They got there and it was dark. So they were going to be staying with Tony's family that night. Like the place wasn't ready yet. So they were going to go stay at Tony's family. It was either her aunt or her grandma. It depends on the report that you look at. Maybe they lived together. I'm not sure. But they were going to stay there, spend the night, and then head over the next day and start setting up the new apartment. But here's the thing. This was Detroit. And as I mentioned in the beginning, Detroit wasn't like the safest place at this time. So Anthony was worried about leaving all of their stuff in his car, right? He's like, dude, like somebody could come, they could steal the car, they could steal our stuff. I am uncomfortable with our entire lives being left outside at the disposal of anybody who walks by and looks in a window. He knew that it wasn't the safest area. Like Tony's grandma even told reporters later that hours before what ended up happening to him happened, Anthony had joked about the fact that he heard gunfire and knew the area wasn't safe. So that night, it was March 18th, 1991, and Anthony decided he was going to go to the vehicle and get something out of it. Some sort of valuable, something that he cared about, something he wanted to bring inside, though nothing was quite as valuable as the life he was about to lose. So he goes outside. It's about 2:15 in the morning. And after a couple of minutes, Tony, from inside the house, hears gunshots. Naturally, she ran outside, and this is where she found her husband lying in the street bleeding. He had been shot 5 times. 1 was to his head, 2 had grazed his head, and 1 was at such close range that there was actual gunpowder burns on his skin. But he was still alive, and he was fighting for his life. So police were called, police and paramedics arrived, and Anthony was rushed to a hospital, but unfortunately his injuries were too bad, and he did not survive these gunshots, this assassination, really. And what's so sad about this is that Anthony's mom had to learn about this over the phone because it was in a different state. Somebody called her and told her about this, and I can't even imagine what that was like for her, because I can't even imagine how long it had been since she had seen him. You know what I mean? Like, he had been deployed, he had been gone, he got home and kind of like went straight to Detroit, so she hadn't seen him. And then to get this call and to learn that your son had been shot. And I imagine what that must have been like for her to like have your child be in the military, have them go over to a war for a year, and for you to be sitting there and worrying about them. And then you find out they're coming home and you get that sort of relief because you're like, oh, they're finally safe. And then within days, they're shot and killed outside of their wife's family's house. So that sense of like, oh, that you finally had is just completely dissipated, and now they're gone. It just sounds so horrible. She said that when she found out that Anthony was gone, she just started talking to God and was like, you said you'd never leave me. You said you'd never forsake me. Like, I need you now to hold me up because I can't do this myself. She said she could just picture her baby lying on the ground in the street, bleeding, alone with nobody there to hold him and comfort him. And she just sobbed. So cops, they're investigating this murder, and right away it looks like a robbery gone wrong because Anthony is shot in the street right outside of the house, and the car that was filled with all of his belongings, it's gone. And though this is incredibly tragic, it's also pretty common, especially in this area. Like, apparently at this time in 1991, Detroit was considered the murder capital of the world, which is crazy because I always thought that title was reserved for Santa Carla. But anyways, apparently there were like 600 murders already in the state at that time. And then other crimes like assaults and robberies was super high. So everybody was at a total loss. They couldn't believe that this could happen. Toni was questioned and she was asked if there was anybody who would want to hurt her husband. And she couldn't think of a single person who would want to hurt him because, again, he was such a good guy. And she didn't think it would be anybody who would want to hurt him who did this anyway, because they had literally just gotten to Detroit and he wasn't from there. Toni was, so nobody like knew him. So this did seem just like a random act of violence. And those types of cases are notoriously difficult to solve because the killer has no relation to their victim. Now, even though this was seen as a carjacking murder in Detroit, and those were very common, Anthony's case did get a considerable amount of attention, both locally and nationally, which was unusual just for the type of crime, which is incredibly sad because you would hope that every single person who was killed would get the same amount of recognition, but that just isn't the case. Many of them don't, but Anthony's case did. There was something about his case that just sort of grabbed people because he was this American soldier who returned home, and like survived this horrific war where like I believe it was 124 of his fellow soldiers had died, and he survived. He came home and was executed in the street, and he had only been back in the States, I think, like 10 days. His family said he was so grateful to be back and to be safe, and he was excited to be with his family and have the opportunity to like start fresh in his life. And he was talking about going back to school and just making these positive changes, and all of that was stolen from him. And it just broke everybody's heart because nobody expects a soldier to come home and again survive such a horrific situation just to be shot and killed in the street. It really appealed to so many people, and it felt like one of their relatives, somebody who cared about, somebody who went and fought for their rights. It felt like they lost somebody that they knew personally, even if they didn't. So many people cared. So many people were affected. Neighbors who lived around Tony's family's home tied yellow ribbons outside their property in Anthony's honor. His funeral was a very large event. There were nearly 700 people present. Aretha frickin' Franklin was present and sang the song I'll Fly Away. And Reverend Jesse Jackson spoke at his service calling for a monument to be erected in Anthony's honor. And of all the people that were there were like military service and all the people who were there who wanted to pay respects to such a wonderful man, people who knew him, people who didn't know him. And like people wanted to be there for Toni and her daughter, and they were like completely wrapped up by the community. People really saw her as a victim as well because like, I mean, even at his funeral, she was just like hysterical, like crying over his casket, and everybody there wanted to make sure she knew that she was loved and supported, and they would be there for her while she navigated this horrific situation. And you know what's so sad, dude, is that after his death, Toni received a letter in the mail from him, dude, a letter he had written before he came home and he was killed. And he wrote how he was so excited to see her, how he was going to make sure he survived that war so he could come back and they could be together. He said he couldn't wait for them to start their lives together. And now he was gone. And the police, man, they were feeling a tremendous amount of pressure to get this thing solved. Now, luckily, it wouldn't take police long to get their first break in this case. And the break that came ended up switching everything around. Like the way that they were investigating this case totally changed. And that's because they found Anthony's car. So you remember when he was killed, somebody stole his car filled with all of his belongings, right? Well, this car was found 2 miles away from Tony's family's home where he was killed. And all of their stuff was still in the car. Which was weird, bro, because why would somebody kill somebody, steal their car and all their shit, and then abandon the car and leave it along with all the shit? Seems like perhaps the motive for the murder had nothing to do with the car and all their shit. So now police had to go down a totally different like avenue of thinking when it came to this murder, because now carjacking didn't really seem like it was likely the actual motive, considering, again, the car and all the shit was still there, right? Okay. And this was stressful for police because there was a frenzy around this case. People were invested. People wanted answers. They wanted somebody to come to justice for this. And now they were like, fuck, bro, like we have to start completely over from scratch because what we thought happened isn't what happened at all. So back at square one, they now have a new crime scene, basically, right? They have a new scene. So they have the car, they have the area around the car, and they're like, okay, let's start searching in this area to see if maybe whoever left the car left anything else, if we can find any new evidence. So they start looking around the car, they start looking in alleys near the car, they start looking in dumpsters and in trash cans, just hoping for any additional piece of evidence because what they had so far wasn't really leading them anywhere. And you know what? They found something huge. Something so huge that it really makes me think that like a lot of criminals are really fucking dumb. Because tell me why. Ain't nothing but a heartache. But no, tell me why police found the murder weapon, a handgun, stuffed into a trash can down an alley that was next to where Anthony's car was abandoned. Tell me why. If criminals are not dumb, why you do that? Now, they were smart enough to like wipe their fingerprints off the gun, or maybe the fingerprints that were there were too smudged to remove, so they weren't able to see who had actually fired the gun. But they were able to look up the gun's like what? Serial number? Whatever it is that one traces a gun with, and they were able to find the registered owner. It was a guy who lived in West Detroit. Yeah, they lived in the west side of Detroit. So they go over and they get there and they're like, oh, this is like an elderly gentleman, not exactly the profile of a person we had in our mind as the person who ambushed and killed this like 20-something-year-old military dude. I mean, a gun is like the ultimate, I was going to say equalizer, but you know, it does give you a significant upper hand, but this just isn't the kind of person that they were expecting to be responsible. So they talk to him, right? And they find out that he doesn't even have possession of his gun anymore. It might have been registered to him, but he had given his gun away. And he had given it to his son, who was significantly younger than him. So the cops talk to this guy's son. And when they talk to this guy's son, he tells them something pretty ridiculous. And like, when I tell you what he says, you're going to be like, yeah, that seems legit for sure. He tells the cops he doesn't have the gun anymore. And the reason he doesn't have the gun anymore is because fitness was his life, bro. Okay, so he's out jogging at the park with his gun for some reason. And the gun slipped down his pant leg, flew out, and disappeared. He just lost it. So the cops are like, what's that I smell? I smell bullshit. That sounds like that's not true. So they press him and they press him, and eventually he gets more honest. And he tells the cops that he is addicted to drugs. And because of his drug addiction, he needed to be able to fund his habit. And he didn't have money, so he traded his gun to a drug house in exchange for more drugs. So he didn't have it anymore. And that seems like the exact last thing you should ever do is have a gun that's like registered to you and your family and trade it to a bunch of people you don't know. It seems like a recipe for police showing up at your door and being like, knock, knock, why was your gun used in a crime? So the cops were able to get this guy to tell them where the drug house was so that they could go and question the people who lived there, right? But this was a problem because notoriously, apparently, like, those who live in drug houses are not the most cooperative with police because like what they're doing themselves isn't exactly on the up and up, right? But the cops get there and they're able to convince these bros that like, listen, we're not here for you. We don't care about your crimes. We're just a couple of two cool dudes hanging out, right? And they get them to talk. But when they finally got these guys to talk, the cops were like, Jesus fucking Christ, man, come on. Because they tell the cops that they had since sold this gun to yet another drug house. So the cops had to go to another house and do the whole song and dance. And after a little bit of time, the cops started to wonder if they're being screwed with because they ended up getting sent to yet another house. So they thought for a bit that they were, on a wild goose chase. But eventually, the goose chase paid off because once they got to the fourth house, they finally got some usable information. Somebody at this fourth house gave the cops a name. Okay, so the person they're talking to is a guy named Antonio. And Antonio tells the cops that one of his friends had come to him and asked to borrow a revolver. I guess this friend of his claimed that he was having problems with his girlfriend's relatives, so he wanted a gun to protect himself. And so this guy Antonio told his friend to just not do anything stupid. Now this friend was a man named Michael Cotto. And when cops saw Cato, shoot. Potato, let's call the whole thing off. Okay? Let's say Cato. Michael Cato, that sounds right. So the cops were like, Michael Cato? That's very interesting, because I think I know who that bitch was. And that's because Michael Cato was none other than Tony, Anthony's wife's brother. What? Yeah, it's all coming full circle. So Michael was brought in for questioning, and when he's sitting down opposite of police, he denies everything. He denies being involved. He denies having the gun. He denies all that jazz. So the cops are like, bet. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to bring in your friend Antonio. We're going to sit him opposite of you, and we're going to see if you still deny everything, right? So they do. They bring this guy in. They sit them across from each other at the table because they want to see if he's still going to lie. And when confronted with somebody who knows the truth, he does not. He instead says that yes, he did have the gun. Yes, he did need it because he was having issues, but he said he had since lost it. He did not have anything to do with Anthony's murder. He had lost his gun. And it was just like this huge fucking coincidence that the gun that he had borrowed, that he had lost, was used to then kill his sister's husband. Now, police kept pressing Michael, and eventually he broke, and he confessed. He confessed not only to being the person who killed Anthony, to being the actual trigger man, but he confessed that his sister, Tony, was the driving factor behind the murder, the person who planned it, the person who wanted Anthony gone. He said that Tony had told him that she hoped Anthony would die in the war, but if he did not, they may have to take matters into their own hands. And then when he came home, they did. According to him, he waited outside the night that they got to the house in Detroit. He waited outside for a signal. And the signal they came up with was that when Anthony came outside, Tony, I don't know why I forgot her name. Tony, she was going to flip the light on, the porch light, so that Michael would know, and then he would know that the time was nigh. So 8 days after Anthony was killed, Tony's brother, 19-year-old Michael Cato, was arrested and charged with Anthony's murder, and he was held without bail. And now that he was in jail, police could now turn their attention on Tony, the weeping widow who had all of Detroit and the country on her side at that point. So police brought in 21-year-old Tony Cato Riggs to sit down and be questioned. And when she was questioned by police and when she was confronted with what her brother had confessed, she still denied everything. She said that she didn't understand why her brother would say something like that, and even said that her brother did this on his own. She said that it was probably something that he planned with his, quote, fellow drug addict friends. She said that she didn't promise her brother anything to commit the murder, didn't plan anything, and she said if he did do this, he did it totally by himself. But police did not believe her, so she too was arrested. A first-degree murder warrant was drawn up, and they were totally expecting that she would be held without bond and that she would go to trial for this murder. Things didn't exactly go according to plan. But prior to things going to complete shit here, when she was first arrested, Anthony's mother gave a statement where she said she was not surprised at all to hear that Tony was involved. And she said of this, quote, "I'm not at all surprised. When he was in the Gulf, he found out she had drained his bank account. She had wrecked his car. She was never there when he called her at 2:30, 4:30 in the morning. Where could she be at those hours? He dreaded even coming back to a marriage like that." Now, police believed that she did it, but when it was put before a judge, they determined that there wasn't enough evidence to actually charge her, because it was determined that Michael's confession could not be used against her. The judge said that Michael's statement was, quote, "in essence, the only substantive evidence against Tony Cato Riggs." And the judge said using the statement against her would violate her constitutional right to confront her accuser. So she was released, and boy, it was a scary time for her to be released, I'll tell you that, because one of the investigators that handled this case said that when she was released, he was worried that somebody would do something to her because people were pissed, dude. Once they found out that she was responsible, or that she was allegedly at that time responsible for what had happened. People were pissed because they had wrapped her up in their arms. They had been there. People wanted blood for whoever did this. And now they thought she did it. So they were like, oh no, I wouldn't feel safe as her walking down the street. Now you may be wondering, like, why? Why did police believe that Toni would want her husband dead? Her like new husband, like this was a new relationship. Why would she want that? Well, it looked like it was a tale as old as time, and it was money, it was greed, it was finances, and that was in the form of life insurance. Money, man. Money, life insurance, money, man. Because like, okay, before Anthony left to go to the Gulf War, Toni took out more life insurance on him. He already had $50,000 that he would have gotten from the military specifically if something happened to him. But Toni's argument for Anthony was like, listen, you're going to like a very dangerous place to do a very dangerous thing. And I just want to make sure if anything happens to you, me and my daughter are taken care of. She was like, you truly never know what could happen. So Anthony goes over to the Middle East, and it's like everything changed overnight for him, and it's so incredibly sad. And this is why the question of the day was like, do you think this was expertly planned? Because I do wonder if Toni ever loved Anthony or if she married him specifically to get his money. Because it's like they got married, he left, and what was his was hers, right? And she totally took advantage of that fact. Anthony had been making money, and Anthony had a savings account prior to that. And now that they were married, Toni had access to both of those things. And she was draining them, dude. She seemed to be a very money-motivated person and wanted the finer things in life, like a BMW and a floor-length fur coat. She was that kind of bitch. And one of Anthony's close friends, this was another army dude. What was his name? Gary, I think. Yeah. Gary said of this, quote, she was taking all the savings, all the money, and everything he owned to Detroit. About the only possession of value that he had was his car, and she destroyed it. She just took him for a ride. She didn't do anything supportive in any way, shape, or form. Now, I guess this finance thing was a real point of contention, and the way that we know this is because of the letters that he sent home, and also phone calls, because like where Anthony was in the military, there was one phone that soldiers could use to like call home, right? And oftentimes his fellow soldiers or friends or like whatever would hear Anthony on the phone and just hear him and Toni screaming at each other, bro. And not just Anthony yelling back at her, but she was yelling so loud that like down the hall, they could hear her yelling over the phone at Anthony. And I guess they wouldn't only fight about finances, they'd fight about his car. And I guess his car was like a very big deal to him. Like he considered this car kind of his baby. He was one of those guys. And Toni was not taking care of it. She was putting like thousands of miles on it and not changing the oil. And this was incredibly upsetting for him because like one, this mattered a lot to him. So it sucked that it was getting damaged, but it also sucked to him that like the woman that he married and he loved knew how important this was to him and didn't have the respect or care to make it important to her too. You know what I mean? Because to be loved is to be witnessed and to be considered, right? And to have the person you love not only just ignoring those things, but like actively going against it is very upsetting. Anthony's friend said that whenever Anthony would get on one of these phone calls with Toni, whenever he got off, he would just be deflated and defeated. Every conversation with her turned into an argument so fast, and Anthony started to feel like the woman he married became a stranger overnight. But it seems to me like perhaps she had always kind of been this way and she was just better at hiding it or better at trying. And like once they were married, she's like, fuck it, I don't have to try. Because like, for example, after all of this happened, it came out that Toni was actually still married to her first husband at the time she met Anthony. And at the time she married Anthony, she was still married to her husband. So she's just like always been a liar. He believed that she was separated from her first husband, that they were divorced, but she didn't even file for divorce till after she married Anthony. And it wasn't even like official until a year after her and Anthony were married. So it's not like she had filed and it just hadn't gone through and she got married. She hadn't even filed yet. It got so bad that Anthony was writing letters to his mom telling her about the problems. And he told her that Toni was spending all of his money and going into his savings and not taking care of the bills. And it was getting so bad that he had to like borrow money from his other soldier friends, which was like the last thing he ever wanted to do. And in one letter, Anthony wrote to his mother, quote, "Mom, I would put my head through a neck of a hot sauce bottle to please her. But Mom, I need happiness in return." But he couldn't get happiness from her. She was so checked out. And reportedly, she was even cheating on him. She was having an affair. Apparently, she had an affair with a guy while he was away in the war, and she got a venereal disease from it. And you know what's fucked up? To explain this disease that she got, she lied to Anthony, and she told him that she got this because she was at a party, which did not happen. So she was lying about that. And she said that eventually she did tell him the truth and that he was understanding. He was understanding why she would be pushed into doing such a thing, but that he was upset at himself for not making her comfortable enough to tell him the truth. So she had to lie in the first place, which I don't know if I believe that, but it's what she says. And if that's his position on it, that's just so sad that he would feel responsible for her not only cheating, but then lying about being like, it's just so fucked up. It just sounds so miserable, honestly. And it's so fucked up because he had enough to be worrying about and dealing with. And now he had the added stress of worrying that his marriage wasn't going to survive his deployment. And he really wanted it to. So when he was finally able to go home for a period of time, he decided he was determined to make his marriage work. That's all he wanted. But Tony, not interested at all. He arrives home for a 2-week, what are they called? Leave? He's off of army work for 2 weeks. He's at home. And she goes to the airport. She picks him up and tells him at the airport that she wants a divorce. She not only wants a divorce, she wants $500 a month in alimony. And she's already ready to move out. She's already found a new apartment for herself in Detroit. She had actually planned to move out and leave before Anthony got home so he would come home to her just being gone and she wasn't going to tell him. The only reason she didn't do this is because she couldn't afford it. She had used all of her money and she had used all of Anthony's money to the point that she couldn't even pay to get her items out of storage. Okay? Reportedly, she was even trying to get access to Anthony's tax refund so she could use that money to move and leave him, which is a bitch move. So when she said she wanted to leave to Detroit, he agreed to take her. Okay, so he took her 3-year-old daughter, and her brother and drove them to Detroit, despite the fact that one of his friends said, like, no, dude, don't do it. Just put her on a bus. He wanted to go. He wanted the opportunity to see if he could change her mind. You know what I mean? He's like, maybe if we're together and we're driving together and we're around each other, we could rekindle what we have and see that we still love each other and make this work. But we know that didn't happen because that's never what Tony wanted to happen. Instead, she already had a plan in motion for her brother to murder him once they arrived so the two of them could split his life insurance money. And bro, you would think, because she was legally married to another man at the time that she married Anthony, that their marriage would be void and she wouldn't be entitled to his money or any of his things. But you would be wrong. You would be wrong. Despite the fact that Anthony's mom tried to fight this, she tried to, what did she try to do? She tried to have their marriage considered void due to bigamy, which is when you like marry somebody when you're already married to somebody else. And she also fought to have his body returned to Las Vegas so that he could be buried with her instead of with Tony. Like, she didn't even want any of this for herself. She didn't want any of his money for herself. She just didn't want it going to Tony. But despite all of this, the judge determined that Tony was still the one, like she was still entitled to those benefits. So she got all of that. She got all of the life insurance money. She was entitled to all of his things. And this was another thing that just outraged people. Because now this bitch wasn't getting arrested when people believed she was involved. And now she was getting the money. So she was getting away with having him killed for money. So she's out living her life, spending the money she got because she got her brother to kill her husband. And meanwhile, her 20-year-old brother is going to trial for murder. He went to jail and then he went to trial, and his defense attorneys did what they could. They said that his confession was coerced. They said that he was questioned without an attorney or a phone call for 13 hours, and that after 13 hours, they wouldn't be surprised if he implicated Abraham Lincoln in the murder just to make police happy. His defense attorney said that the police had a tremendous responsibility to make sure this case was solved and somebody was convicted, no matter who it was that was convicted. And then they said that it made no sense for Michael to kill Anthony unless he was going to get something out of it, and he wasn't going to get something out of it if his sister Tony wasn't involved, and she wasn't involved, so there was no reason for him to kill Anthony. The jury was like, absolutely not. And 20-year-old Michael was convicted of the first-degree murder of Anthony Riggs, and he was sentenced to life in prison, I believe, with no possibility of parole. He did make a statement at the time of his conviction where he gave his condolences. He gave his condolences to Anthony's family, and he even gave his condolences to his sister Toni. But he added that he was not guilty of the crimes he had been convicted of. He said that the whole situation had been very difficult on him and his family, and said that the court and his trial was filled with lies. He said that he really believed that the jury had formed their opinion before they even heard the case. And the judge in this case said that typically he feels bad to give a life sentence, but not in this case. So he had tears in his eyes and his head in his hands when he learned his fate. And his sister, the person he supposedly killed for, wasn't there. She wasn't there at all for any of his trial. This woman was free for 2 years, dude. 2 years while police worked tirelessly to try to get some sort of evidence that connected her to Anthony's murder. But there was really just nothing. But then they got a break, okay? And this came 2 years again after Anthony was killed. And basically it came when the DEA, the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, called the investigators that were working Anthony's murder case, which seems random, but we are going to get there. Apparently, the feds, the FBI, were conducting this massive nationwide drug investigation, and this operation resulted in the arrest of dozens of people since it began, which was like 18 months prior. And it went everywhere. It went from Detroit to Texas, even to Colombia. Like, they were really deep in the situation. And of the people that were arrested, there were these 2 dudes that were arrested in Texas who were involved with drugs, okay? And so these dudes, they're arrested. And when they were questioned and asked to give the names of some of the bigger people, the bigger fish that were involved, these 2 dudes gave police the name Toni Riggs. Toni Cato Riggs, Anthony's wife. Now, prior to this, Toni had not been on their radar at all when it came to this. But now these 2 people were saying she was involved, and these 2 people were trying to move I think it was 10 kilos of cocaine from Detroit to Texas. No, from Texas to Detroit. So they're like, Toni, Detroit, Texas, it's all lining up. So this couple, this was Rosarita? No, that's the type of beans. Wait. Rosita, Jesus Christ, Rosita and Reginald, they were arrested near, I believe it was Tyler, Texas. And when they were arrested, they had 22 pounds of coke in their trunk. And they said they were hired by none other than Toni Riggs to move this cocaine from Texas to Detroit. But they said that for whatever reason, the shipment was running late, so Toni had to leave to go back to Texas, I believe it was. No, to go back to Detroit to take a final examination for her nursing school or some shit. So they were like, you know too much information about this woman is the point. And it seems like perhaps maybe she is actually involved. So with that, Texas police contacted the police handling Anthony's murder case. And they were like, hey, is this woman still a suspect in your murder case? Because we have this going on. And the police in Texas are like, yes, she absolutely is. So the Texas police contact the Detroit police that are handling Anthony's murder case. And they're like, hey, is this woman Toni Riggs still a suspect in the murder? Because we just arrested her here in Texas. And they're like, yes. Or rather, they were gonna arrest her. They hadn't quite arrested her in Texas yet, but that's what we're getting to that right now. Again, this feels random, but this matters. So the cops in Texas are like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're going to try to arrest her in Texas, and then we'll hold her, and that'll give you guys time to build a case against her with her off the street, right? So they contact Toni, and they decide they're going to dress up, or no, not dress up, impersonate. They're going to pretend to be drug people, okay? And they're going to call Toni in to interview her for a position. So they call her and they set up a meeting for her in a Detroit office. And basically she's sitting down with these people thinking that they're drug lords and that they're going to hire her to work for their drug organization. So I guess the reason that she wanted to take this particular job, because it just seemed so random to go from nursing and then murder and then working for drug dealers, and being in a drug ring. But I guess she was broke again because she had a serious spending problem. So now she wanted to get a new job to support her habits. She needed to support her kids. She needed to support her life. So she meets with these guys and she's telling them that she could be a swallower for them, which basically means that she's going to have drug-filled balloons in her stomach while she travels from the US to South America. So this is serious business. But these cops who are pretending to be these big drug dudes are kind of I don't know, man. I don't know if you're right for this. You're just some chick. You don't even have a record. You have this serious, this question mark around you because you've been looked at by police. How do we know you're not a narc, et cetera, right? And that's when, in order to show them that she was a badass, I guess, she tells them that she was the one who orchestrated her husband's murder. Not only this, but she says that in addition to orchestrating her husband's murder, she was about to be orchestrating the hit of another man. She was going to spend $10,000 to kill one of the friends of her brother, who she says was a key witness in the case, and she was going to have him killed too. And for the record, police looked into this guy and found him. I think it might have even been Antonio, but don't quote me on that, and found that he knew nothing about this. He knew nothing about this. He wasn't involved, and Michael never said he was, but she was just saying this to seem like a badass, I guess. I don't know. So the point is, she's now admitted it. She's admitted to being involved, and she's part of this drug situation. So she's arrested, and she's charged with drug charges related to the cocaine and the smuggling, but she's also given charges related to her husband's murder. Finally. People were so relieved. They finally felt like justice was going to be served. His family was they just had this like burden off their shoulders. His mom said that Anthony's mom said that this is what she had been praying for. And Anthony's cousin at the news just broke down and cried. Now, at her trial, the prosecution said this entire thing had been for money, and not just the murder, everything. The marriage was for money. The murder was for money. She was a conniving con artist of a woman who weaseled her way into his life to take everything she could from him before taking his life to get a payout. The way that they proved this was by showing that the life insurance plan was taken out, that there were inconsistencies in her statements to police, and they showed the videotape of the interview of her with the officers who were posing as those drug lords. But, what's crazy is they were not able to show Michael's confession, and Michael refused to testify against her. Which, what a brother. She just threw you under the bus so bad, and you're still defending her. Now, the defense pointed out that there was no real evidence that linked Tony to this murder. They also made a point to point out that initially the charges against her were dropped because there was no merit, and they claimed that in the interviews with these undercover cops, Tony was pushed into saying something untrue to prove that she was more of a criminal than she was. I mean, she also said she was going to have a hit on this key witness who wasn't even a key witness. So things were really up in the air when the jury was sent to deliberate, or at least that's what it seemed like from the outside. But apparently behind those doors, it wasn't as back and forth as you would think, because apparently when the jury was back there, they were pretty sure almost instantly what they felt was true. But still, they did their due diligence, they looked at the evidence, and after 4 hours of deliberation, they came back with their decision. Tony Cato Riggs was ultimately found guilty on all the charges against her, and when she learned her fate, she had no reaction. Before her sentencing, Anthony's mother made a statement where she told the court and she told Tony that her entire life was in shambles since losing her son, and said though at that time it had been 3 years and 3 months, it felt like it had just happened yesterday. So Tony was given an automatic life sentence with no possibility of parole, so she was going to be spending the rest of her life in prison, and that's exactly what she did until she died in 2018 of cancer. So she stole Anthony's life just so that she could end up in prison for the rest of hers. Her ideas ruined so many people's lives. They left Anthony's parents without a son, and they left her own daughter without a mother and without an uncle. And it's just so incredibly heartbreaking. And with that, my friends, is the story of the murder of Anthony Riggs. I hope that it was informative. I hope I gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I just want to thank you for hanging out and remembering Anthony with me today. Now, considering everything I told you throughout this video, I want to revisit the question of the day that I'm now going to rephrase a little bit now that you have some information and context. But the question of the day is this: do you believe that Anthony's murder was planned from the start? Like, do you think that she ever really loved him, or do you think she married him so she could take all his money and eventually have him killed? Because it all happened so fast. But you'll have to let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Before you leave, please don't forget to leave me a comment down below with whatever case you'd like to see me cover in the future. As you may or may not know, I have a long list of cases, but whenever you leave me a suggestion, I put it on my list with your name next to it, so if and when I cover it, I can give you a shout out. I love looking into the cases you guys suggest because they're often cases I haven't heard of or cases that need more coverage, and I know you're filled with great ideas and great taste, otherwise you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out new videos every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my merch store, which I need to make some new merch. You guys should give me some ideas. because it's been a while, and a link to my membership, which I have recently made much more accessible to everyone. I lowered the price by like a ton because I want more of you to be able to engage and enjoy and talk, and people who want to be part of that. That's down there for your convenience. Oh, also, if you don't already know, now you know that what you are seeing with your eyes, what you are listening to with your ears, is also a podcast now. True Crime with Bratterstein, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you want to go listen, I would love that. I would love to be able to get into the algorithm there. I'm finding a lot of joy and satisfaction over there. So if you want to do that, that'd be great. But if you don't, that's okay. I just want to thank you for being here. And now, with all of that said, one, I want to apologize for my voice throughout this video because I've been sick. And if my bangs look silly, they look way better in person. The camera makes them look stupid because of this MySpace angle I have, but wait, what am I saying? Oh, I just want to, outro. I just want to thank you here. What? I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else on the internet. That's tight. You're tight. I hope to see you in my next video. And in the meantime, take care of yourself. Mwah.